also on my way out again on matters of national interest. It just so happens that um, this period between June and July seems to have been very attractive for a number of meetings. We had the ninth Summit of the Americas, which took place early in June, and as soon as that was completed, movements towards the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting um, took place in Kigali in Rwanda, which that was a meeting that was postponed, I think, twice as a result of COVID. Um, and before that, we had an initiative in Guyana following from a heads of government meeting where the president of Guyana undertook to kick off some serious attempts to focus on our food security. I took part in the food security meeting in Guyana, and I also took part in the ninth summit. And prior to the summit taking place in the 6th of June to the 9th, I think it was, there were some serious diplomatic efforts to bring about certain conclusions. I simply want to say that um, much of what we have been doing in June is ongoing, and you would see us continuing to meet. For example, the meeting that took place in Guyana, it was really a CARICOM initiative led by Guyana, and it was attended by a number of heads of government and technical people and interested parties from Brazil, the northernmost state in Brazil, Roraima, which shares a border with Guyana. They took part in that effort that we had in Guyana, and it was all about preparing to make our region more food secure. And for that to happen, a number of other things had to flow from that meeting, not the least of which are the interest to be generated for the kinds of investment to be made to produce raw materials for food production on a scale that would provide some level of comfort and security to the region, where Guyana, having the land space and with some Brazilian support in the Rupununi, there's tremendous potential for us to produce the kinds of things which we are having difficulty obtaining on the world market. We're talking here about grains, wheat, soy, corn, rice, which are basic food products. And there are only a few CARICOM countries like Guyana and Brazil, and have the kinds of land space that we can have the economies of scale to produce and replace the kinds of volumes that we import from around the world. And the same thing goes for meat, where we import a lot of our meat from Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and some parts of South America. So what we have been focusing on at CARICOM before the crisis hit us was how we can bring about increased production of the raw materials, which is either the grains in large volumes and the husbandry of animals, cattle and livestock like sheep and goats, so that we will not be so exposed. And just as we were considering this, as we had done for quite some time, the reality hit us, where even if we wanted to buy some of these things, they were not available. And to the extent that they are available, the prices have been dramatically increased in response to the changes that have been taking place in the world, not the least of which is the war in Ukraine, the inability of those supplies from Ukraine and Russia to come into the marketplace and so on. And we also had the whole question of energy security. I don't know if you may recall it must have been about 3 years ago, or yeah, it might have been about 3 years ago, there was a CARICOM United States meeting on energy security. I attended that meeting, and the person who is now president of the United States, he was he was the leader, and John Kerry was the Secretary of State at the time, and that was that meeting, that CARICOM meeting on energy security with the United States, was in fact a harbinger of things to come, because we've now seen where, as a result of disruptions in the world market for reasons known to you, we suddenly found ourselves with the energy market, which is priced by international arrangements, um, where you have Brent, you have West Texas, where indices are placed on these products. And we suddenly found ourselves overnight with the world market being disrupted and supplies of raw materials being dictated by political decisions, and the prices just gone through the roof. And here in Trinidad and Tobago, we were not, even though we are a producer of some of these products, we were not spared the pressures, the upward pressures. While one side of it is beneficial because we are a seller and we benefit from some of the increased prices, but the way the industry is structured, the price increase passes down into the system. There's no way you can buy cheaper natural gas or cheaper crude oil because you have a different arrangement. So it's a world market where the price is set and all participants are influenced by that price, either upwards or downwards. So all of these developments have made it very stressful for those of us who are involved in the management of the country's affairs. And I can tell you that we in Trinidad and Tobago, we had, because of our situation with Venezuela and our petrochemical industry and our LNG production from here and our gas shortages, we had to be much more out front. There was 1 month, I think it's the month of April, Minister Young was in Washington 4 or 5 times that month, talking to the people who make the decisions and who are to be influenced. I myself took part in some of those discussions, because the way these things go, you have to talk to people, you have to present your case, sell your arguments, and literally Trinidad and Tobago has been standing in the international marketplace, in the international discussions, literally making our points and making our suggestions as to what our solutions are. It turns out in the end that we have been able to demonstrate that we do have some spare capacity in this country in the very areas where there are shortages, in the case of LNG and in the case of ammonia and fertilizer and some other fertilizer inputs. And to the extent that we are able to have increased availability of natural gas, we can substantially impact on the supply of some of these products. We did find the people who are users and who were in our corner, supporting us in our advocacy for changes. One of the changes that you would have seen, I don't know how many of you would have read an article written by Ambassador Ron Sanders, who is the Antigua and Barbuda's ambassador, describing our experience at CARICOM with respect to this whole development that took place in 2019, which changed our march towards some element of increased production of gas and gas products here in Trinidad and Tobago and the region. And to the extent that what influenced us negatively then has been determined not to be a success in international diplomacy on the part of those who advocated those developments in 2019. Trinidad and Tobago's position has always been, we continue to hold those positions of how we should treat with the Venezuelan problem. We have been advocates for dialogue, and that dialogue is still the best route. And we have been finding some common ground and some support from areas where people have changed their position between 2019 and now. And as we went to the Summit of the Americas, you would have seen certain participants were there, and some were pointedly not there. And certain conditions that were automatic in 2019 are now not positions that are advocated or defensible. And there are still changes to come, because what exists now cannot be the status quo. And I can tell you, from a number of high-level quarters, there are attempts being made to change the situation that exists now. And we in Trinidad and Tobago are not without some interest in that, and we are not short of advocacy on our behalf in these changes. So it has to work its way through the diplomatic journey, and that journey is in fact taking place. When we met at the summit in Los Angeles, it was the view of the CARICOM leaders that we are not prepared to just go to a meeting, make a speech, and walk away after getting a photo up. We decided that the Caribbean was sufficiently important, and these issues are life and death issues for us, and that the United States is in fact a major player and influencer, and not without some blame in what we have experienced and are experiencing. And we decided that we would make strong demands, and our first strong demand was that we would want to meet with the President of the United States and no other. And I can tell you that we did have some very valuable time with the President of the United States and the Vice President and other senior officials. And the CARICOM, the leadership of CARICOM, the entire group of CARICOM leaders who were present, were able to sit down and spend some extensive time presenting our argument to the United States that we are of the view that we were not being taken seriously and we were treated with grave indifference. And the time has come for us to be able to speak openly and to get some specifics. I think the President agreed with that, and arising out of that, the Minister of Foreign Affairs can tell you, and maybe later on, as the matters gel, he will tell you that some very specific things were put in place. There are some specific groupings on energy, food security, and finance, especially finance with respect to the whole management and investment in climate change areas and disaster. We at CARICOM, we are hammering very hard to get the international agencies who make the arrangements for accessing the Bretton Woods institutional arrangements for financing to make special arrangements or workable arrangements for CARICOM territories and small island states in general who unfortunately find themselves affected by natural disasters, because natural disasters annually affect us and frequently have the effect of decimating our gross domestic product. And we are required to miraculously overcome that and service international financing on terms as if it didn't happen. And we are making the argument that these are special cases that ought to be considered for special arrangements in financing. And I think the United States is supporting that position. And we expect to see arising out of the committees that have been put in place to specifically deal with these matters, which were the nature of the discussions we had with the President and the Vice President. The Vice President having had a prior meeting with us at an earlier time. So there's a building up of diplomacy that is aiming to deliver some specific results on some long-standing problems that have not been addressed in a very frontal way. As I speak to you now, there are three groups of teams. One team on energy, which when I get to CARICOM tomorrow, it will be confirmed that I may be responsible for leading that team at the political level. Another team on food security, which should be led by the President of Guyana, and the finance team would be led by Prime Minister Motley of Barbados. And the reason is that under these three headings, where we have our three major problematic issues. And there will be the political leadership to that, and beneath that level, the ministerial level, and technocrats have been given a time frame within which to come up with specifics to which the major influencers can react. And we are very hopeful that those technical meetings to come up with specific solution-oriented outputs, those meetings start next week. I'm also chairing a committee on specific aspects of inter-regional transportation, where our people are working alongside the CDB technical people to specifically look at this issue of inter-island marine service, based on the model of the federal boats that we used to have, the Federal Maple and the Federal Palm. As you know, there was a time when there was inter-island service by these two vessels, which were provided by the Canadian government at independence. And the experience is that those vessels had tremendously well served the movement of goods and people in the Caribbean at an affordable cost. And I remember as a schoolboy, my school team coming straight out of school and exploring the Caribbean on a federal boat, and coming out of Jamaica as a university student, making my way back to Trinidad on a federal boat. Today, those infrastructures are not there. So we believe that we can re-examine those, and the Caribbean Development Bank is in with us, and we should get a report on that, hopefully in Suriname. And these are a number of things happening which involves a number of people, and hopefully we will find the financing to impact upon some of these things. And the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs can give you some up-to-date on that later in the week, I presume, and as either bilaterally or multilaterally with the media, just to ensure that you are brought into the picture with the details of what is happening, because a lot is happening. With respect to the agriculture forum from Guyana, which we all participated in, there's a follow-up meeting to take place here in Trinidad on the 18th of August, I think, because we are organizing that meeting where we hope to interest those persons in the Caribbean and Caribbean friends in finance who can see our initiatives as opportunities for investment, because without significant investment to put in the preparation and the execution of the food production, those raw materials, talking about the corn, the soya, the wheat, the rice, in the various areas, it's not going to happen. Because the scale at which it has to happen, significant sustainable investment, attractive investment opportunities have to be there. And if we are in fact to seriously impact our food security nervousness, we have to get into serious production. And that is an area that is a very high priority, which we're trying to move it from talk to action. As you know, it has been a lot of talk for decades, but I think the rubber has hit the road now, where trying to buy food, not being able to buy it, has frightened very many people who will just prepare to talk about it or to rely on our small-scale peasant-type agriculture and family farm-type agriculture. We need to get beyond that. I mean, for example, you know that Trinidad and Tobago is self-sufficient in chicken, poultry, and we consume a lot of it. What you may not know is that we can only do that on the supply of regularly imported boatloads of American grain. They fed those chickens that we eat at the various locations, fed by American corn and American soya. The oils that we use, the various food oil, the edible oils from American grain. And as the markets go up there, we import, the price increases here. And we are not in a position to replace those imports with current local production, especially on the scale at which we're consuming them. So we either have to change our consumption patterns and the items we use, either partway or whole way, or produce more of those items that we have been accustomed to use. I can tell you, fortunately, that the trials in southern Guyana have been very successful in rice production, in corn production, and soya production, and now are awaiting major investment to large volumes. So as we go to Suriname, we'll be coordinating our efforts in the winding down, I hope, of our pandemic responses, because so far we have been fortunate in that the Omicron variant has not been replaced by any more deadly one. I think there were one or two variants that appeared, but they have not been of great concern because they have not shown to be more dangerous than Omicron. It is possible that a significant proportion of the population has by now been exposed to, and many persons have had their bodies responding to the virus, and that is a natural immunity with a strain that had not been as deadly as the earlier strains. Thank God for that. I did mention yesterday evening that it is our intention, given what we have experienced and what is happening around the world, that we now can begin to remove one of the last vestiges of the pandemic, which is the mask that we're wearing. And the Minister of Health will confirm it is our intention to remove the masks, the mandatory requirement for masks by the middle of this month, and make it voluntary. But there will be some areas where there would be some strong recommendations that, because of those what's happening in those particular areas, it would be useful to have the mask voluntarily used. So we can look forward to that, barring any unforeseen surge in any new variant. We should be taking these masks off by the middle of this month, which is next 2 weeks. And that would be a great signal that we have survived, I dare use that word, that we have experienced and have come through a very frightening period. I want those of you who believe that it was a joke to cast your mind back to the days when the news came from Italy, where people were dying like flies in Bergamo, and when New York was virtually shut down, and we weren't even sure what was happening except that people were being killed by a virus. We weren't even sure how the virus was being spread, and we had no idea when we'll get a vaccine. And of course, even when we got the vaccine, we weren't too sure that people would use it, because this is the age of the conspiracy theory, where the vaccine is in fact not going to, the virus is not going to kill you, but the vaccine will. But we experienced all of that. And now we are at a stage where we have opened the border. We have removed the restrictions on the border. I came in 15 minutes before the restriction. It cost me $95. And, it came into effect at midnight. I came in at 11:28. And I could have remained on the tarmac until midnight and come in. But I paid the $95 in Los Angeles and got my negative test. I hope it was the last negative test. I had the last test I had to do because I did so many of those tests. But fortunately, we are all here. We did suffer some losses as a country, but God has been good to us. It could have been so much worse. It could have been so much worse. It has affected us terribly. It's disrupted our financial management. It has put us into significant debt. It has disrupted our economy. It has disrupted the world economy, which is continuing to affect us. So we're still experiencing COVID and its effects, but not in the way that requires us to space out as we have been, not see our friends and family, we're not wearing the mask in a few days' time, and we don't have to be tested to see our personal status before we move around at home or in the region or in the world. So we can safely say that we've come a very long way, and hopefully in the not too distant future we can talk about COVID as a thing of the past. But That is not for me to determine at this time. The WHO will tell us when the label can be removed, and our Minister of Health, who has done tremendous work here and his team in the Ministry of Health, we will continue to owe them a debt of gratitude. We go on to deal with the impact. There are some people who are studying for us the supply chain disruptions and the potentials for us, the impact of the war in Ukraine, and we have to look at avenues for increasing our resources. That I was talking about that a while ago with respect to the agricultural raw materials, and most importantly, for us and our Caribbean neighbors, we have to acknowledge that we are being negatively impacted by climate change, whether it is in the frequency and severity of storms, coastal erosion, dramatic coastal erosion, and other aspects. We're just seeing changes that are causing us concern and affecting us in one way or the other. And it's not only us. You look at the weather patterns outside, and you will see people are experiencing extremities. It's not the absence of this, it's the extremes that are the extreme hot weather, extreme cool weather, storms, and their passage, and in places, one of the things that is affecting us tremendously, which has fallen below the radar so far, is the mass of seaweed that has been destroying our beaches. Our tourism potential, a significant part of that was attracting people to come to use our coastal areas. It is amazing that there's so much continuous supply of seaweeds disrupting all our beaches, on the Atlantic side in particular. And this is attributed by some experts to the warming of the water, whereas before, when we were doing geography in my early days, we spoke about the Sargasso Sea, where sargassum weed were literally confined by the circulation in a particular place in the Atlantic Ocean. It appears as though the weed has broken out from that area, and the whole Central Atlantic area is now a Sargasso Sea, because we have such a tremendous volume of the weed coming in, and sometimes it makes the beaches unusable. And that certainly is having a negative impact on our ability to attract people for whom the beach is the pull factor in the Caribbean, to places like Tobago and our neighboring tourist destinations. We also are very concerned about our security here in Trinidad and Tobago. We seem not to be able to get away from many aspects of violent crime coming from a number of directions. Notwithstanding our best efforts, every single day there is a spate of violent crime, largely driven, but not only driven, by firearms and defying logic. I was just told a while ago, it has not been confirmed yet, that there were 4 people who were found killed on the North Coast. We had an engagement between police and, again, my early reports are police and armed persons in a confrontation in Port of Spain early this morning. There were 3 people who were killed there. And there's so many people in our population who are prepared to risk their lives, arming themselves, and prepared to engage law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago. It is very it's comforting to know that our security people, on so many occasions, have to do the reasonable thing of responding to people who are armed. And what does the population expect? We can't walk away from armed people who are handling firearms illegally. And in that kind of contact and confrontation, we are experiencing this unnecessary loss of life. And it is something that we are going to have to focus on more. We are going to have to find resources, but you must remember that we are already focusing on it. We are directing significant resources to it, and we just are concerned that we are not seeing any abatement in the personal conduct of many people, which results in these unnecessary loss of life. I understand that the police service would be giving us the details of what they are experiencing and how they are proposing to respond, and that would be for a separate interaction with you, members of the media. This meeting in Suriname, we expect it will be attended by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and we are very happy for that, because you will know that CARICOM in 2019, at the start of the Venezuelan problem, which has shifted from one shape to another, we did find ourselves, there was a CARICOM team that went to the office of the Secretary General to, I would say, to complain and to persuade that we do not go down the line as was being advocated by some of the more experienced countries who sought forceful regime change in Caracas, and the Secretary General, sticking to the treaty conditions of the United Nations, had stood with us on the grounds that we were in fact correct as to what was happening within the context of the United Nations Charter. A lot of water has flowed under the bridge since then, and we expect that the Secretary General's visit to CARICOM is a signal of a recognition of our international importance. While being small, we insist that we are not insignificant and that our interests will not and ought not to be ignored. So we look forward to that. And we also expect that there might be other guests who would visit us who have some significant interest in ensuring that CARICOM remains the platform of diplomacy from our island nations, and that our region remains a zone of peace. The Secretary General of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States would be there. And we are also to discuss the very intractable problem and terrible conditions in Haiti, where Haiti is the most populous CARICOM nation, and its governance structures, its institutional collapse is something of concern to us. And CARICOM has been trying to play a role even before it reached the stage. CARICOM has been trying to play a role in guiding Haiti away from this outcome. We were unsuccessful in being taken very seriously by the government of the day. Unfortunately, some very disturbing developments have taken place in Haiti, and now the situation in Haiti is very, very worrisome, and would and must form part of CARICOM's discussions, and it will. And we are also going to discuss the territorial issues, and of course, the energy issues would be upfront, where there are now 3 CARICOM countries that are seriously involved as energy producers. One is the long-standing producer, Trinidad and Tobago, and the other is Guyana, the most recent producer, and Suriname to become a producer in the very near future. CARICOM and our interests indicate that we are to stand firm in resisting any external solution to be imposed upon us, that our involvement in hydrocarbon business is bad for climate change, and therefore no new producer should be encouraged into the business. CARICOM rejects that position because that has to come from people who are comfortable where they are. And you must not tell us now that if we have those resources, we are not to find them and bring them to market. And we, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Guyana, we have agreed, and our position is that as long as those resources are within our territory, whether on land or in our maritime jurisdiction, we will exploit them. We believe that LNG is the cleanest fuel, and we believe that oil still has a place in the international market. And just the same way that other developed countries are using their resources, we will use ours and do so responsibly, but we will not be driven out of a market which we have only come to know as making a tremendous contribution to our economies and our people. I think I can stop here now and leave it to you to ask a few questions, because I'm sure there might be a few questions. I've been away. I should mention that the reason why I was away for so long is that I have, after the conference ended in early June in Los Angeles, I remained there and did what I didn't do in 2020 or 2021, as I would have done if had things been normal. I was scheduled to go and do some medical reviews and examination so as to ensure that I am of use to myself, my family, and the nation. And it was very convenient for me having postponed those. And in the interim period during that postponement, I did have a significant medical procedure done with respect to my cardiac condition, which I've been monitoring and managing. And I want to thank my local doctors who have done very well in keeping me whole. And they collaborate very cooperatively with my doctors abroad. And I had some prostate scares as well. And I did use the technology and the experience that was available to me, and I continue so to do. I do have some reasonably good reports from the tests I've done in the last few weeks, the last of which was last Tuesday. And but you know, this prostate thing is something that it is not an open and shut door. It is a could it, would it, maybe, should it. You know, the lawyers have wherefore, therefore, herefore, and the doctors have an equivalent. But fortunately, I am not symptomatic in a way that is causing alarm, but I am advised to be concerned that I am to know a bit more of what is happening. And you get a whole range of advice, and I try to get as much as good advice as I can, and also encourage the men of the nation to make full use of the early discovery treatment of this special problem which we have, and it is a problem which seems to be that the statistics have shown that Afro males are more prone, but it's not that it is only among African people, but the frequency is higher among African men, who happen to be the population that does the least for all kinds of reasons in seeking help. And I simply want to encourage our men to not be shy in seeking help in this way. We do have some specialists here locally. Over the years, we have made some contact with some people abroad who are specialists, and I did meet one of the doctors who looked after me about 8 years ago, and I was very excited with what he was telling me they were able to be doing now. And the technology is tremendously advanced and is advancing, and there are huge investments being made in the new technologies. And I'm hoping that Trinidad and Tobago, our talent here, our people who are involved here, would share those areas of cutting edge technology to allow a wider service to that population I was looking at cricket this morning, and at the venue where the game was being played, some of the older cricketers were raising some money for prostate cancer, and they actually said that in the population of who was there this morning, statistically, 2,000 men who were in that population watching that game this morning are likely to come down with prostate cancer. And that is the nature of the ailment that we're dealing with. And so therefore it is something that ought not to be taken very lightly. And finally, I think in Trinidad and Tobago the time has come for us to declare violence as a public health emergency. And we need to find solutions to treating with violence in our population. If there was a disease that was killing people the way people are being affected by violence in our population, we would have had no difficulty in labeling it a public health emergency. And I think we need to focus on this question of how much violence is generated in our population, in the home, in the school, on the roadway. Public safety and public security, unfortunately, has pushed itself up to, it is number 2, because we still maintain that educating our population is number 1 from the standpoint of budgetary allocation. But from the standpoint of national unease, I would say that this violence, which is a public health emergency, has pushed itself up to the number 1 concern in our country. Of course, I know there are those who will see opportunities to talk flippantly and to promote themselves as solutions. I simply want to warn the population that half of the people who are offering you solutions to fighting our criminal scourge, and curse are themselves contributors to the problem. That's all I will say for the moment. So thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll try to address them now. Just identify yourself and put a question, please.
Good afternoon to you, Prime Minister. I must say you look well. It is Urvashi from TV6. I must say that you look well, but a little bit of what you said regarding your health may be interpreted otherwise. So I just go ahead and ask, were you given a clean bill of health? Because there are very many persons in the country who would be concerned. Yeah.
At my age, a clean bill of health is a luxury that doesn't come every day. I would say that I've been given a bill that didn't have any alarm bells, but it has a lot of cautions. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, in your absence, so much has happened on the national landscape. So if you would allow me to just go directly into the issue relating to the Attorney General. The Law Association issued a statement earlier today signaling that they will be convening a special general meeting in order to, I believe, have a vote of confidence or no confidence in the Attorney General. My question to you this afternoon is, do you believe that the Attorney General brought this country into disrepute, having been disqualified by a Miami court?
I do not share those views. Clearly, there was an error made, and the Attorney General sought to rectify it, and he has made public statements, I think on 2 occasions, clarifying exactly what has happened. I have seen no person or entity able to say that what he has said is not true, and the matter has been dealt with by the court, which is dealing with a particular matter, and therefore I don't have anything to add, and I'll go further. I will not attempt to add anything to it because the very nature of the business, you know, we have a saying in Tobago, saying that goat that a ball for the water, now he will want it. You see, half of those people who are pretending to be concerned about what is happening in Florida and quoting it in the cloak that they're concerned about the national interests, Let me just point out to this country and you, the media, that is the Section 34 Brigade. And I, for one, will not for 1 minute listen to any of them about bringing this country into disrepute. You know why? I was in the parliament when they used the parliament and used me to use my parliamentary vote to pass a bill into law. And when the country was watching fireworks, that same group of people proclaimed Section 34 to prevent their friends from having their day in court. That was done with my vote in the parliament. And it was only when we discovered what they had done and bringing the country in disrepute, that was bringing the country into disrepute. And the opposition leader was then the prime minister who oversaw that. It was so disgraceful and so unbearable that we had to come back to the parliament in a matter of days to vote into law retroactively another law, because the very hour that proclamation took place, those people who are in the Miami situation that they're talking about now and pretending to be concerned about, they had already gone to court seeking to benefit from what the government had given them through the parliament. So I don't want to hear anything from them. And they will not get me to make any statement about the Attorney General or that matter, because all they're doing is sieving through every syllable, every line, looking for a technicality, because they have no interest in the evidence. And they are hell-bent on making sure that certain people do not have their matter heard in any court in this country or abroad. So that is why I want to hear nothing from them. And they will not goad me into making any comment about the Attorney General or that matter so that they could go to the court and say the Prime Minister said. This country has, some people say, a 9-day memory. I have an elephant memory where those people are concerned, because it's the worst part of my history as a parliamentarian, a lawmaker, where I was part of making that law, only to discover that they had used the parliament criminally. And this attempt of trying to get people to talk out of turn or to try to create dust where none exist is to benefit their friends in Florida for the same objective, that there be no trial and that there be a technicality. I want no part of that. As far as I am concerned, the matter is dealt with in the court. The Attorney General has spoken to this country twice on a position that's very clear, and we will wait to see what happens in the court, where our position, this government's position, is that the matter should proceed through the court and people should have their day in court. Their position from day one is that there ought to be no trial in the court. So we are far apart on this. And as for the Law Association, the only thing I'm concerned about, who in this country has the opportunity to pass a vote of no confidence in the Law Association? Because I want to vote.
Before we move away from this topic, I'd just like to understand if this is something that you would have spoken with the Attorney General about. I know you were abroad when he issued his statement and so on.
I saw at the very beginning, one or two persons, especially somebody from the media, was sending me questions asking me if the Attorney General, if the Prime Minister had done his due diligence and whether the Attorney General had recused himself. I simply want to say to the population, there is a responsible Prime Minister in Trinidad and Tobago, and there's a responsible government in Trinidad and Tobago, and the public interest is well served. The Attorney General recused himself from this matter. And for those who were not involved to know that, that was made known when it was raised. But I can tell you, the Attorney General never took the position that he will not be recused. I see you in the media writing maybe loosely that he was thrown out from the matter by the Florida court. That is not true. He was never in the matter. He recused himself. That was made clear at the appropriate time. And that was not anything new to us, you know. We had a situation with CLICO. Attorney General Rowley was a director on a CLICO bank that passed in the CLICO collapse. And for all that we did with the CLICO, including going to court and getting back $15 billion as a result of a lawsuit that we brought in the court and put a receiver in with CLF, the then Attorney General played no role in it because we were cognizant of the concerns, similar concerns arising in this matter. So we as a government, we are aware, and all those who give us advice, we thank you for the advice, but we were not unaware of our responsibility. And for those who pretend that they have to tell us what to do, I see some member of parliament attacking a senator who is in the Attorney General's office for simply telling the population what the Privy Council said about a matter, especially when the matter was being misrepresented 24 hours a day by persons with their own interests. We're not fazed by that. None of it phases us. We will simply do the job that the population elects us to do, which is to make sure that Trinidad and Tobago has a responsible government taking responsible action. And as for the Law Association, I want to remind you in the media, it is the same Law Association who, when they were exercising themselves on the Chief Justice removal, sought to entrap me in that matter by inviting me surreptitiously to be a witness in the matter. I, who had the responsibility of saying yea or nay to a tribunal on the case that they were promoting. It was because of my experience and my concern and my caution that I was not entrapped into that matter as a witness. That's my experience in the Law Association. And when they were not able to do that by that route, they went around and around and around until eventually, as Prime Minister, I, who had nothing to do with their ambition and their behavior, and they like or dislike for the Chief Justice, I ended up in the court having to take taxpayers' money to defend my office in the court for a decision that was made quite legally and properly, because the Law Association felt that I should allow them to pick their own Chief Justice. I don't know how I ended up in the court having to answer in the court for a matter involving the Chief Justice and the Law Association after they failed to make me a witness in the matter. So if you find me unfazed by the Law Association, I have good grounds, because they only seem to be interested when it is time to create public discord. When it is time to stand up for the public interest, they bury their heads in the sand like ostriches. Understand? So we will do our job for as long as we are required to do it. And when it is somebody else's turn, they will do it differently. We know what they did when it was their turn. And I just want to finally say, all this story that you all been carrying on with for the last 3 weeks, I have not seen sufficient text or commentary as to where it came from. It didn't come from the Attorney General. It come from people stealing public money in this country. And hark, hark, the dogs do bark. The thieves have come to town. And they're not going to tell us what to do. When the whole matter has nothing to do with the Attorney General recusing himself. It has to do with people stealing money from this country and trying to get away as their entitlement, evading the day in court, and making as much confusion, blow as much smoke as you can, and telling you, what moral authority does Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar have as opposition leader? She, the queen of Section 34. Every time I think about Section 34, it reminds me of discovering that a government had done that and that I was led to vote for that. Go on the Hansard. I see Rowley making comments. He stood up in the parliament and answered a question saying that we do not intend to do this for the next 3 years, that's 36 months, and it will not affect matters. Oh yes, within a matter of weeks, they used it to prevent people from having evidence led in the court about significant sums of public money that went into the hands of persons who thought that was their birthright. I am not prepared to be led by such people.
Prime Minister, good day. Charlene Rampersad from Guardian Media. On this same issue, can you tell us how much the automatic disqualification of the AG and SACOL law has cost the taxpayers of this country?
I don't know about any automatic disqualification. I know about a recusal, right? And I'm staying right there. The Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago is under a recusal, and that matter is proceeding in the court. So I do not know about cost. The matter is proceeding in the court. The court's ruling, based on the conflict with the Attorney General, is that the lawyer, the law firm that we were using, appears to be conflicted. The Attorney General acknowledges that, and the court has asked that that group of lawyers not be in the case, and another group of lawyers have taken over and is proceeding to advance the country's interest in the court. That's what it is.
If we could take a look, you spoke extensively on the Law Association, right? We know in 2009 there would have been a motion of no confidence against the then Attorney General and your predecessor, Mr. Manning. After that motion of no confidence was carried through by a vote, Mr. Jeremy would have offered his resignation, and your predecessor, Mr. Manning, would not have accepted it. Have you given any thought to what you'll do? Because the Law Association meeting is on the 15th of July. Whether you'll take the same route?
I have said all that I have to say about the Law Association, and we'll cross those bridges when they come to it, when we come to it.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Darren Baho from the Newsday. So I would have read the ruling from the Miami court, and it is clear that the Attorney General and the U.S. law firm were disqualified. There's no issue about recusal in the ruling. So that is what the judgment says.
Could I stop you right there? The recusal of the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago is not a matter for the court in Florida. It's a matter for the officer here in the Office of the Attorney General. Okay? What the court did was to uphold a complaint by a complainant in the court, and the Attorney General has in writing explained how that came about.
Okay, Prime Minister.
And I am not in a position to add a syllable to what the Attorney General has said, except that I have seen no contrary fact that what he has said is not true.
Okay, if that is your understanding of the judgment, I'll take it from you as that. I will ask you on the other matter, other significant ruling from the Privy Council, which showed that an Attorney General under the PNM would have influenced and interfered with the Piaco matter, which is now possibly in jeopardy after 22 years before the courts. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I have no comment on it, because I'm not sure that your interpretation is what the court said. The court indicated, I read the judgment too, and the way you have couched it is not exactly what the court has said. And the jeopardy that you're talking about, fortunately, I don't have to answer for any of those things, so I will not pretend to have to answer for them.
Okay, Prime Minister, I just want to switch the topic. The SEA results came out yesterday, and there was a statement by the Minister of Education of over 12,000 students falling below the pass mark. Is this a matter that concerns you and would now reconsider the continuous assessment of students moving up so that we would not have students after 5 years not being literate or able to move on to secondary school?
I've seen the comments, and I've also seen the minister and the ministry saying that there are special steps to be taken to treat with what is in effect an unusual situation. I don't know that I want to make any off-the-cuff condemnation of the system, except to say that the outcome that you have referred to are reasonably expected in the situation that we're dealing with. Understand that we tried to carry out schooling unplanned during a pandemic. And for many of these students, that was not the best way to provide them with the education. And therefore, the falling below the standard is to be seen in the context as an outcome of an unusually stressful period. You may recall that for a very large number of weeks, we had our schools closed even before any special arrangement could be made to replace our schooling. And then eventually we got into some kind of a replacement when it was clear that the pandemic would last for some time. And even that, there are downsides to it, because not every child would have got the benefits of that attempt, but we did attempt to bring about some education. And it has turned out that I would have been surprised if it was better than what we were doing before, because educating the population in the pandemic, the logistics of doing that, from the parenting standpoint, from a feeding of the information, from the security, from the course content, and from the very the mental aspect of what the children were dealing with. So unfortunately, that is the outcome of the period of the pandemic. What I'm looking forward to is the rectification that was mentioned. I think I saw a figure of a certain amount, I think about 9,000 students for remedial work. And we just have to try and catch up with that. And hopefully, I'm looking forward to the next year when the pandemic is not with us, hopefully, and that we have normal schooling, that the input of our teachers to our population would result in a better outcome.
Mr. Prime Minister Urvashi again, there have been allegations of some level of financial impropriety. Now, these allegations are online. They come from someone who is said to be a relative of a cabinet minister. But in any event, it says that foreign or U.S. accounts of a senior government official is under scrutiny by the United States. Some are saying, Mr. Prime Minister, that this is you. So I have to ask if you are aware of any member of your cabinet or any member of your government are subject to any sort of such investigation.
Let me tell you what I'm aware of, Obeshi. I'm a great fan of the media, as you know. But when the media is taking its timing from social media foolishness, I really don't want to get involved in that. Right? So my time is too valuable. And I think your time too is too valuable to allow some, I don't want to be uncharitable, some person who probably was having a bad day and blurt out their inner bile without a shred of evidence or a source of credibility anyway. And let's not go around it. I saw the post, and it didn't take long for my name to be associated with it. And I was amazed, I must say I was amazed at the level of nastiness that existed in the national community, where there were people who were prepared to receive that with great gusto, hoping that it was true. And I just felt sorry for such persons. You know, I was going through the papers for the period when I was away. I do that, to see what was said here and while I was away. And I saw a number of photographs of me as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in the presence of the President and Vice President of the United States, where I had 3 meetings. And alongside that, I'm seeing foolishness written by some person or person unknown that I had problems with the United States authorities with respect to money laundering, and that my absence from returning here is because I was being detained in America. That is entertainment of the fools, and you should leave it alone. Absolute nonsense. But it bothers me that mainstream media takes its timing from that. Because if that is so, we are all exposed to the malice of the worst. And I simply want to say to all those who enjoy themselves in that, anytime a policeman come to my house, come to Lime, because I have a lot of police friends, or they come to ask me about somebody else. Okay? So I'm not going to waste any more time on that. But social media is being used to perpetrate some of the worst of our people. I don't know that everybody's doing it, but in Trinidad and Tobago, it is par for the course. Absolute rubbish. And it seems that the more ridiculous the rubbish, the easier it is to get into the narrative of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, and to think that there are people who should be providing guidance to this country who fall for that foolishness and get themselves associated with it. Members of parliament get themselves associated with that, as if by saying so and regurgitating it is going to be true. It just makes us all look bad. We might have had a prime minister at some time who had those problems. I could guarantee you this prime minister doesn't have those problems. Understood? And for those young people in particular who think this is par for the course and who think that where there's smoke, there's fire, let me just say to you all, I have no account in any bank outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
Prime Minister, if we could just switch gears for a bit. You spoke about declaring violence a public health emergency. Can you give us some details about that, a timeline, what sort of measures we would see?
Not today. I just raised it as a matter that we have to focus on. It's a specialist area, and it involves the entire national community seeing it that way. I don't think that we're ready for that yet, but the timeline. But we certainly, as a matter of fact, we were just about to introduce it as an arm of Ministry of National Security outreach and training when the pandemic came. We had organized some specialist responses, and it is something that we need to go back to, because this is more than just the evening news and somebody accidentally getting something done. It is just too prevalent, and it's unfortunately desensitizing the population. So it becomes easier for it to happen.
And Prime Minister, you made reference to a question that I would have sent you via WhatsApp.
I said that?
Yes.
You sent me a question about what?
On the due diligence aspect. So
you admit that?
Yes, I did.
So don't go any further.
So
I advise you, don't go any further.
I'll ask the question.
You know why? Let me tell you why, because I think your colleagues need to know. You are the gentleman who stood outside the Hall of Justice for hours waiting for me to come out of the court when I sued the Integrity Commission. And you waited and took a picture with the bars in front at Carnival time and had me coming out with the bars in front of me. And the headline then was, Rowley appears in court. You remember that? I who sued the Integrity Commission, I appear in court. When somebody appears in court, you know what that means? It means that they were taken to court for some criminal matter. That, go and check the archives in the Express, and you will find that there, and that was your doing. And you coming to ask me now about the what?
Let me ask you a question.
I am not going to answer you.
So I don't have any personal project.
It is not personal. I am just pointing out the role that the media is playing when there's malice. And if you believe the nonsense that somebody put on social media about me and due diligence, while I'm representing this country as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago with dignity that you're not accustomed to, you're on your own with that. I am not going to go down that road with you. Because if there's another role you can play, but you choose to play this role, and I will not go down there with you. If you know something otherwise, you print it without my comment. Is there any other question?
Sir, on March 16th,
Is there any other question from anybody else?
So on March 16th, you appointed Mr. Reginald Armour as the Attorney General.
If I was, regardless of the feathers I may have had in my cap, if I was being led by Alan Alexander, I will consider, it's quite possible I might have considered myself a junior too. I'm saying again, this matter is very sensitive. There are people who are prepared to turn and twist every comment, and therefore, since I am not involved in this matter, I will restrict myself from making any comment about it, and I will rely on the matter going through the court as I have relied previously, because I still have confidence in the courts, even though some people believe that evidence is irrelevant in court proceedings. Thank you all very much. Ovashi, you have one more question? Thank you. Ovashi, I thought you had a real question. I have no thoughts. Thank you all very much. Thank you.